Welcome to Creative Tien channel. Today we are going to knead a lace hat on a knitting machine. And we are going to use Brother standard gauge machine with only the kneader and not the ribber. And we will need a punch card device and a lace punch card. The card I'm using is Brother number 20M. And you will need an extension rail on each side so I can park carriage on the right and the lace carriage on the left side. I'm using fingering weight yarn, and I start with knitting a few rows of the waist yarn and hang the comb, and I change to the main color yarn. I have the white color here, and we can start the lace pattern. For the cast on, I start from left 72 to right 72 stitches. So I have totally 144 stitches. Because my lace pattern is multiple of 12 stitches, so I try to make sure my stitch is a multiple of 12. And based on your lace punch card, you have to adjust the total stitch numbers. I also have a video about knitting lace punch card on a standard gauge machine. I will link in the description box below if you want more details. Here I already set up my punch card, and I want to make sure it starts with the row number 1. You see the line here. And we start with the red dot on the bottom. So we lock the card first. And for the lace carriage, I set it to N for the normal lace knitting. The F is for fine lace. For the K carriage, I just set it to plain knitting. The dial is going to NL, and you pick your gauge that fits your project. I set it to number 6 now. I'm setting my counter back to 000 before I start the lace knitting. And we are ready to knit. The lace carriage is on the left side, the K carriage is on the right, and the punch card is locked. First, we are going to move our lace carriage from left to the right. And you can see the stitches are selected. That's lace stitches. And then we can start unlock the punch card just by placing the dial to the center. That's a green triangle. And then we just follow the direction of the arrow. The red arrow is for the lace carriage, and the black arrow is for the K carriage. So for the next 3 rows, we just move the lace carriage to the left, back to the right, and then back to the left. And the next row, we have the return black arrow. That means we are going to use a K carriage. We are going to move to the left side and then return back to the right side. And all the settings are for plain knitting. So we just go to the left. Back to the right. After that, we still have to move the lace carriage from left to the right to complete this row. Now we complete this row. We are going to continue 3 rows of lace carriage, and we'll just keep working this way until the length we want. I will knit around 8 inches. And I also want to make sure I have enough weight. I'm going to place more weight. And you can see the row counter only counts when we use the K carriage. When we use the lace carriage, it's just transferring stitches, so it doesn't count as a row. When we are starting the K carriage on the right side, the yarn tend to be loose because we move it far away from the knitting and park it on the extension rail. So make sure you pull the yarn so it's tighter on the top. Otherwise, you'll create a loop at the side like I did here. And that's not a big deal. You can just clip it. We can weave in the end later. But that's a small mistake that happen to me all the time. And you can see the pattern starting to form. And the pattern is always centered in the 0 in the center. So you can plan your head design based on that. I just finished my first repeat of my punch card. That's 48 rows, but on my counter, it only says 24 rows because it doesn't count the lace transferring rows. So we will do several repeats, maybe 2 more times, and see if we need to adjust it. And my total length is about 8 inches or 8.5 inches. So I think I'm okay now for the length. So I think I will stop the lace stitch. And I'm going to knit a few rows of plain knitting. I will move my lace carriage back to the left side and lock my punch card. And I'm just going to use the K carriage and knit a few rows of plain knitting. And the next, I'm going to use a transferring tool and transfer every other stitch to the next stitch. So you will reduce half of the stitch. And then we'll knit 1 row. After transferring, make sure the empty needle go back to the non-working position, the A position, before we knit the next row. We'll just cut the yarn, thread it through every needle, and take it off the machine. Now we have this piece knitted. I can just gather the top by pulling the yarn. And I want to make a double layered one. So I'm going to do the same lace layer again. I'm going to hand the waste yarn back to the knitting machine and knit from there. So we are going to have 2 layers of lace, and you can have 2 different colors. Now I'm going to hand back the knitting. You can see there's a row of the white yarn. That's my main color. And that's a stitch we want to pick up. Once we hand it back, we will repeat the same as before. We will knit a few rows of plain knitting and then start the punch card lace pattern. I hand the knitting back to the machine. I'm going to push out the needles so I can knit the first row better without drop stitch. And make sure I have the weight. I'm also changing the yarn to a brown color. And then I will start knit 4 rows of plain knitting, just like before. Now we finish knitting both sides. I transfer the stitch so it's every other needle now. And place the empty needle back. I will knit 1 more row and then take it off the machine just like before. Now we will fold the pieces in half so the outside is facing out, and we'll take off the waste yarn and we will seam up the sides. Close the top just by pull the yarn tight and sew a few stitches, and we will be done. Here is my seam. It's the edge of the pattern, so it's easier to hide. I'm not doing matrix stitch because I didn't need extra stitch at the end, and I want it to be more flat, so I'm just sewing one side up, the other side down. We skip one row, go down, and then this side skip one row and go up.